For months, the world had been waiting. High above the quiet cities and sleeping oceans, the telescopes never blinked. They watched a single point of light, a small, nameless traveler known only as 3I Atlas, an interstellar object, cold, silent, passing through our solar system for the first and last time. Astronomers said it would be simple, predictable, a routine encounter. Just another piece of cosmic debris brushing past the sun before disappearing forever into the dark. But as the days drew closer to its perihelion, the moment it would pass nearest to the sun, the data began to tremble. Tiny fluctuations, light patterns that didn't fit, numbers that whispered something's not right. At first, no one noticed. A small error here, a faint discrepancy there. But in science, every fraction matters, because the smallest difference can reveal the biggest truth. And then it happened. The burst. Not a soft glow, not the gentle flare everyone expected, but a violent, blinding pulse that carved its name into the surface of the sun itself. For 3 seconds, space lit up like a silent explosion. Satellites caught the flare. Ground observatories went white. And across every monitoring station on Earth, one single line appeared on every screen. A light curve so steep, so sharp, it broke the model completely. Something inside that object had triggered a burst from the sun that no one could explain. The scientists stared in disbelief. Their equations didn't fit. Their software failed. Even the instruments started returning nonsense data. Readings that jumped, froze, then fell silent altogether. It wasn't just a flare. It was a response. But to what? When light travels across space, it carries a message. One written in temperature, frequency, and time. Every pulse of brightness tells us something about what it touched, what it burned, and what it left behind. But this light didn't behave like sunlight. It had a rhythm. A sudden rise, a perfect plateau, and a fall that came too soon. No natural flare behaves that way. It was almost intentional. Across the globe, scientists compared notes, one in Hawaii, one in Chile, one in Japan, all recording the same impossible curve, same duration, same intensity, same unnatural precision. The sun had released a burst, not like a chaotic storm, but like a signal. A heartbeat, and the source of that rhythm pointed directly toward 3I Atlas. Some called it a coincidence. Others said it was just physics, magnetic reconnection, coronal reaction, or solar wind interference. But deep down, even the most skeptical researchers felt it, that quiet unease in their chest, because this wasn't how the universe was supposed to behave. The sun doesn't answer. It doesn't react. It doesn't speak. But that day, it did. In the hours that followed, data flooded in faster than any system could handle. Terabytes of light readings, heat signatures, magnetic distortions, all overlapping, all contradicting. Every frame told a story, but none made sense, and yet there was something oddly familiar about the pattern, a symmetry too deliberate to ignore. As if some intelligence had designed it, not to destroy, but to be seen. It's strange, isn't it? How silence can feel alive. How the cold vacuum of space can suddenly seem aware of your gaze. For years, humanity had pointed its eyes outward, searching for signs of life. But what if, for the first time, the universe looked back? One scientist described it best. He said, "It's not the brightness that scares me, it's the precision." The flare faded. the instruments cooled, and the sun returned to its usual rhythm, like nothing had ever happened. But in that moment, something had changed. Not in the sky, but in us. Because now humanity had seen something it couldn't explain. A pulse that shouldn't exist. A light that refused to follow nature's rules. And while most people went back to their lives, never knowing what had unfolded above them, the scientists didn't sleep that night. They sat under the glow of their monitors, replaying the burst frame by frame, frame by frame, frame by frame, looking for anything that could explain what the sun had just done. But the deeper they looked, the more questions surfaced. The flare wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was patterned, like a signal waiting for someone to notice. And soon they realized something chilling. The flare's rise and fall matched a rhythm that shouldn't exist in solar behavior. A sequence of intervals, each separated by exactly 11 minutes. Too short for natural rotation, too long for instrument interference. It was a message, written in light. But who, or what, was sending it? Outside the atmosphere, 3I Atlas continued its slow, steady drift through the ecliptic. Unbothered, untouched. A fragment of something ancient, maybe, or something engineered. As it rounded the sun, the object's reflectivity changed again. As if reacting to the burst, the readings grew unstable. Temperature up, then down. Brightness oscillating, like a machine powering on, then off. By dawn, every observatory had the same question written across their internal logs. Did the sun just communicate with something? And if it did, what does that make the sun? A star, a source, or something far more conscious than we've ever imagined? The waiting sky had answered, and the echo of that moment still lingers, buried in the data, whispered in the static of deep space, waiting for someone brave enough to look again. Because what began as a simple observation had just become the greatest mystery humanity has ever faced. And this was only the beginning. At first, it looked like noise, a few stray signals buried in the static, nothing more than background radiation echoing from the edge of space. But then, someone noticed the pattern. It was faint, repeating, perfectly timed. Every 11 minutes, across observatories in Chile, Japan, and Northern Europe, the same pulse appeared, identical in shape, identical in rhythm. It didn't matter where you were, the same echo ran through every data stream on Earth. And that shouldn't be possible. Light from the sun doesn't repeat like that. Radiation doesn't sync across hemispheres. Cosmic noise doesn't keep time. Yet somehow, the entire planet's instruments were blinking in unison to something that seemed alive. In the Chilean desert, the Arma array recorded its first pulse just after midnight. The sky was crystal clear, the air perfectly still. When the reading came in, the technician leaned closer, thinking it was interference. But then, 11 minutes later, it happened again. And again. The same clean spike. Identical amplitude. Identical decay. It was like hearing a heartbeat through the void. They ran diagnostics, recalibrated, even disconnected local receivers to rule out interference. Nothing changed. The pulse kept coming. And somewhere across the Pacific, in a quiet control room in Japan, another team saw the same thing. Their data had synced to the second. Thousands of kilometers apart, two observatories watching the same impossible pattern unfold. When the scientists cross-checked timestamps, silence filled the room. Every 11 minutes. On the dot. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was structured. Someone, or something, was timing the light. The next day, space agencies joined in. NASA, JAXA, ESA. They all confirmed it. A rhythmic pulse traveling through the solar spectrum, originating near the sun. But here's what made it stranger. The pattern wasn't spreading outward. It wasn't radiating like a wave. It was directional, focused. Every telescope that locked onto 3I Atlas caught the same result. The signal was strongest when aimed directly at the object. When they looked away, the pulse vanished. It was as if the light itself was pointing back at them. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the implications were heavy. For decades, humans had searched for a message in the stars, something to prove we weren't alone. A sign, even a whisper. Now they had one. And it wasn't coming from a distant galaxy. It was coming from right here, within our own solar system. The chatter on private research channels became frantic. Could it be solar activity? No, it's too consistent. Cosmic rays. Not at this timing. Instrument error? Every telescope in the world can't be wrong. So what was it? If the pulse wasn't from the sun and not from our instruments, then it could only mean one thing. It was intentional. Hours turned into days. The data kept coming. Pulse after pulse, like a metronome marking cosmic time. Every spike carried the same signature, the same clean symmetry that nature never produces on its own. One scientist described what it was there. Prime intervals. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. It was as if the pulse was counting, whispering in the universal language of mathematics. By now, the story had leaked. Online forums buzzed with theories. Was it aliens? A secret satellite? Some even claimed it was the sun, communicating through quantum resonance. But deep inside the observatories, behind closed doors, the scientists didn't care about the headlines. They were staring at something that broke every rule they'd ever known. Light wasn't supposed to behave like this. It wasn't supposed to organize itself. It wasn't supposed to repeat, like a signal being transmitted. And yet, here it was, an 11-minute rhythm burning through the darkness. Some began to wonder if 3I Atlas wasn't just an asteroid after all. Maybe it was a probe. A machine disguised as rock, an artifact passing through our system, waking briefly as it neared the sun, like a traveler checking in before continuing its endless journey. And maybe that flare from Chapter 1 wasn't just the sun reacting randomly. Maybe it was answering. For the first time, humanity had recorded something that looked and felt intelligent. And that realization carried weight. Because if this pulse was a message, then someone had to have sent it. And if someone sent it, that meant they knew we were here. Late that night, the Chilean operator stared at the monitor one last time. Another pulse blinked across the screen. 11 minutes. Right on time. He whispered quietly to himself, "It's waiting for us." And maybe it was. By the end of the week, the phenomenon had a name: the echo sequence. Every signal aligned to 3I Atlas's trajectory. Every pulse matched its distance, perfectly adjusting for Doppler delay. It was tracking the comet's orbit, as if timing itself with the sun's gravitational pull. It didn't just happen near the sun, it followed the sun. Like it was tethered, like it was connected. When the last sequence arrived, something changed. For the first time, the pulse came early. 10 minutes. 39 seconds. The perfect rhythm had broken. And within seconds, the temperature readings from the sun spiked, a sudden surge of heat from its lower corona. Just as the signal vanished, the pulse was gone, completely. No fade-out, no distortion, just silence. And in that silence, every monitor froze on the same timestamp. 11:11 UTC, the same number that had repeated in every burst since the beginning. 11. No one could explain it. Not the physicists, not the engineers, not even the skeptics. All they knew was that something, somewhere, had been counting with us. And now it had stopped. But silence doesn't always mean it's over. Sometimes silence means it's listening. And as the scientists stared at the dark side of the sun, a quiet truth settled in their minds. Whatever 3i Atlas was, it wasn't just passing through. It had come to observe, to measure, to respond. And the next time the light returned, the world would never see the sun the same way again. It started as a whisper, hidden deep inside a stream of infrared data. At first, no one saw it. The numbers looked ordinary, a sequence of thermal readings coming from 3i Atlas as it drifted around the sun. But late one night, a young researcher at the Infrared Observatory in Hawaii, something didn't make sense. The object's temperature wasn't following the rules. It was cooling when it should have been heating. Every other comet, every asteroid that passes near the sun, they all do the same thing. They absorb heat. Their surfaces rise in temperature, and their frozen cores begin to melt. It's predictable. It's physics, but not this time. When 3i Atlas reached its perihelion, its closest approach to the sun, the readings dropped instead of climbing. At first, they thought it was an instrument error, maybe a calibration glitch or dust interference. But then the data repeated over and over, in perfect rhythm with the light pulses that had been haunting astronomers for days. Heat up, cool down, heat up again. Each change synchronized exactly with the 11-minute interval. The sun would flare, and 3i Atlas would cool. The sun would rest, and it would warm. It was as if the object was breathing, but in reverse. The more they watched, the stranger it became. Infrared telescopes from Chile, Japan, and Arizona all recorded the same thing. The thermal pattern wasn't random. It was structured. The heat didn't spread naturally across the surface. It moved in lines, almost like circuits. Sections would light up in perfect order, one side cooling, the other warming, creating a rotating pattern that traveled across its body like waves of controlled energy. To some, it looked mechanical. To others, biological. No one could agree. But one thing was clear. It was responding. Inside the data center, a senior researcher finally said what everyone else was afraid to. No natural object behaves like this. Silence followed. For a long time, no one spoke. Because the moment you say something like that, you can't take it back. It changes everything. Soon, heat maps of 3i Atlas began circulating through classified channels. Bright red bands forming perfect geometric patterns. Cooling zones moving in symmetry. Every scientist who saw it came to the same quiet realization. It wasn't chaos. It was design. The heat shifts were deliberate, controlled, coordinated with the sun's pulse. It was as if 3i Atlas was regulating its temperature, adapting to solar radiation like a machine adjusting itself to survive. But that raised an even bigger question. Survive what? When something travels between the stars, it faces extremes that would destroy any normal object. Radiation, vacuum, cosmic dust. Yet 3I Atlas wasn't breaking apart. It was thriving. Every burst of solar energy seemed to make it stronger. Its reflectivity increased, its structure held firm, and its orbit remained perfectly stable. Most comets crumble after perihelion, but this one was changing, evolving, as if the sun's heat wasn't hurting it, but powering it. Then came the real shock. When the data was mapped in 3D, the temperature pattern formed something unmistakable. Symmetry. 6 major heat zones, evenly spaced, each one activating in sequence, like points on a rotating mechanism. It wasn't random. It wasn't weather. It wasn't chemistry. It looked like control, like intent. The headlines never reached the public. The data never made it to open servers. But within closed circles of astrophysicists and defense analysts, one theory began to spread quietly, almost fearfully. What if 3I Atlas wasn't a comet at all? What if it was something built, something ancient, something intelligent, something that had come to observe the sun? In private labs, they simulated the thermal behavior, trying to reproduce it using every material known to humanity: metals, ice, composite alloys. Nothing matched. The only way to recreate that heat curve was to model a system with active thermal regulation, like a spacecraft with sensors, shielding, and energy redistribution. It was functioning like technology, just not ours. But if it was technology, then that changed everything we thought we knew about the universe. Because this wasn't some distant radio signal or a theoretical exoplanet. It was here, in our solar system, talking to our star. And for the first time, humanity wasn't the one sending the signal. The next morning, another anomaly appeared. The object's surface temperature suddenly dropped to near absolute zero, colder than space itself. Then, within minutes, it spiked back up to 500 degrees. Number Comet could survive that. No rock could endure that level of change. But 3 Atlas did, effortlessly. Almost like it was testing its own limits. A new theory emerged, one that kept scientists awake for nights on end. What if 3I Atlas wasn't reacting to the sun at all? What if it was communicating with it? A machine that wakes when it feels light, that listens when a star speaks, that calibrates itself, not for survival, but for synchronization. The pulse, the heat, the rhythm, it all fit. It was a dialogue, written in energy, and the sun was answering. At this point, disbelief had turned into obsession. Every telescope pointed at the object, every satellite tuned to the region. But then, something unexpected happened. Right after the latest heat spike, all instruments recording its data, infrared, optical, and magnetic, shut down simultaneously. For 7 full minutes, the feeds went black. No signal, no error message, nothing. And then, just as suddenly, they came back. The object's temperature was perfectly normal again, stable, silent, like nothing had happened. But deep in the telemetry data, a single anomaly appeared, a spike in the electromagnetic field, not from the sun, not from the telescope, from Earth, as if something had looked back. By now, the scientists were divided. Some said it was all coincidence. that the patterns meant nothing, that nature was still unpredictable. Others weren't so sure, because if this was natural, it was the most unnatural natural event the universe had ever shown us. A comet that regulates heat like a living system, a sun that responds in rhythm, and a pattern too precise to be an accident. That night, one of the lead researchers wrote in her private logbook, "It doesn't want to be found, but it's watching how we react. Every pulse, every shift, it's learning." No one's sure what she meant by that, but maybe she wasn't talking about 3i Atlas at all. Maybe she was talking about something deeper, about the strange awareness that now hung over humanity. The realization that for the first time, we weren't just studying the universe might be studying us. And as the heat faded and the data stabilized, one question lingered, like static across every observatory on Earth. If this wasn't a natural object, then who or what sent it? And why now? When we were finally ready to notice, it began as a simple radar scan. Routine, ordinary. But the echo that came back wasn't. For days, deep space radar arrays across the planet had been tracking 3i Atlas as it drifted through its solar orbit. By now, scientists knew its trajectory, its temperature, its light pulses, everything they thought could be known, until something new appeared in the signal, an echo that didn't belong. It wasn't diffuse, like the reflection of rock or ice. It was sharp, clean, metallic. The kind of echo that comes from a smooth surface, something built, not born. At first, the analysts thought it was a calibration glitch. Radar reflections can be tricky that close to the sun's radiation. But the echo repeated every single time the beam touched the object. Same distance, same frequency, same perfect return. The surface wasn't scattering the signal, it was bouncing it back, like a mirror. When they modeled the reflectivity curve, it didn't fit anything natural. No comet, no asteroid, no debris. The numbers were too exact. Even as 3i Atlas rotated, the signal's strength didn't change. That shouldn't happen. A natural body tumbles. It spins unevenly. Its brightness and reflectivity fluctuate. But this object didn't. It stayed steady, perfectly stable, as if it was maintaining orientation, deliberately. That's when someone noticed the strangest detail of all. It was aligning itself. As the solar magnetic field shifted, 3i Atlas shifted with it, smoothly, silently, like a compass needle turning toward the sun. Every movement matched the field line readings with uncanny precision. No known rock or object in the solar system can do that. To move like that, something has to understand the field. It has to read it, respond to it, follow it. For hours, the scientists just stared at the data streams in disbelief. No one wanted to say it, but everyone was thinking the same thing. This wasn't a comet. This was control. And control means intelligence. Inside one classified report, the kind not meant for public eyes, a single line appeared beneath the last graph: artificial behavior detected. That was it. No speculation, no theories, just those two words. Artificial behavior. Two words that would unravel everything humanity thought it understood about the space around us. Then, at 2:11 UTC, the radar feed went dark, not faded, not corrupted. Dark. Every station, from California to Canberra, lost the data at the exact same moment. 7 minutes. No signal, no telemetry, no explanation. just silence. And then, without warning, it came back. All systems online, all instruments normal. But the object was no longer where it should have been. It had moved, slightly off course, just enough to prove it wasn't a glitch. Just enough to suggest intention. Back in the control rooms, the tension was suffocating. Imagine watching something billions of kilometers away, something that shouldn't be able to think or move or choose, suddenly shift direction. And not randomly, not chaotically, but deliberately, as if adjusting its position, as if watching back. When they zoomed in on the trajectory data, one pattern stood out. The object wasn't orbiting purely around the sun anymore. It had begun to drift slightly above the ecliptic, the flat plane where most planets orbit. It was observing from a higher vantage, almost like a satellite in a polar orbit, surveying everything below. The precision was surgical, the calculations flawless. Someone or something had just taken control of it. Or maybe it had taken control of itself. No signal was ever transmitted. No radio waves. No infrared communication. Nothing. Yet the behavior screamed intelligence. It was almost as if the object was trying to hide its presence, moving only between bursts of radiation, aligning itself within the sun's interference to mask its trajectory. If that was true, it wasn't just intelligent, it was strategic. As more observatories joined in, one by one, they confirmed the same anomaly. Smooth surface reflectivity, precision alignment with the sun's magnetic field, and a 7-minute blackout every time the radar beam hit a specific angle. 7 minutes, always 7. Not 6, not 8. 7, like a reset, like a sequence, a cycle. At first, the number didn't seem important, but later, someone cross-referenced it with earlier data. The 11-minute pulses from the light anomalies, the synchronized heat fluctuations. 7 minutes, 11 minutes. 2 prime numbers, 2 perfect intervals. Was it coincidence or a pattern? And if it was a pattern, who was setting the rhythm? In the following hours, the team ran radar sweeps from different angles. Each time, the echo returned stronger, clearer, and more structured. Not random reflections, structured bands. The radar images began to show what looked like panels, flat planes connected by symmetrical edges. Every return signal mapped something too geometric to ignore. The outline of a form, elongated, angular, consistent. By the fourth sweep, a shape emerged, something long and narrow, with perfectly straight surfaces, like the hull of a ship. One engineer whispered under his breath, "It's not natural." Wick, and the room went quiet. Because now they were staring at something that resembled design. The kind of design that only purpose could create. Whatever 3i Atlas was, it wasn't a fragment of rock. It was a construct, a machine. But here's the question that haunted every scientist in that room. If it was built, who built it? And why send it here? To our sun, of all places. Was it observing the solar field, harvesting energy, or something else entirely? Something we weren't meant to see? The radar feed kept looping, frame after frame, until one of the analysts noticed something strange. At the exact moment the signal returned after each 7-minute blackout, a faint spike appeared on Earth's magnetic readings. Not powerful enough to cause harm, but real. Almost like a ping, a reflection. a handshake between the object and us. The scientists couldn't explain it. How could something billions of kilometers away reach across that distance with precision? Unless it already knew where to look. Unless it already knew we were watching. By dawn, the world's leading astronomers gathered in a closed session, the kind where phones are banned and recordings are erased. They discussed the radar data, the alignment, the silence. No one could explain it. But one thing was certain: the object was reacting to us. 3I Atlas was no longer just a visitor passing through our solar system. It had become something else, something active, a machine that responded, that moved, that hid, a machine that knew exactly what it was doing. And as it aligned once more with the sun's magnetic field, the final reading flickered on the monitors, a reflection sharper, brighter, and more precise than ever before. Almost like a signal, almost like a message. Then darkness. 7 minutes of silence. And in that silence, humanity took its first uneasy breath as it realized, whatever 3I Atlas was, it wasn't lost in space. It was home. And we had just been noticed. It began the moment the systems came back online. After 7 minutes of silence, the instruments started blinking again. The feeds returned. But what they showed wasn't the same as before. Something had changed. The light wasn't random anymore. It had structure, rhythm. The bursts that once came in clean pulses were now layered, woven together like chords in a song. Every telescope on Earth began recording the same thing: harmonic intervals. A pattern so precise it couldn't be noise. It was as if the universe had started talking back. At first, the teams thought it was just solar activity. Plasma interference, magnetic waves bouncing through the corona. But when they slowed the data down, the pattern repeated, over and over. Frequencies rising and falling in perfect ratios. It wasn't chaotic, it was mathematical. When light carries harmony, it carries intent. And this light was speaking in numbers. Radio telescopes tuned to the solar wind picked up faint frequencies buried deep in the static. They were subtle, almost ghost-like, too weak to be heard by human ears, but powerful enough to be felt, like an unseen vibration running through the solar system. One by one, observatories confirmed the same sequence. 2 pulses, then 3, then 5, then 7, then 11. Prime numbers, the universal language of intelligence. No storm, no magnetic fluctuation, no natural process produces prime intervals in radiation. This was deliberate. The scientists didn't want to believe it, but the data didn't care what they believed. The signal was real, and it was growing stronger. Somewhere between the sun and 3I Atlas, an invisible conversation was unfolding. Each light burst from the sun came back reflected, but not identical, modified, shifted, like a reply. It was as if the sun had sent a pulse, and 3I Atlas had answered. At NASA's Deep Space Network, one analyst stared at the pattern for hours before muttering the words no one wanted to say out loud, "It's communicating." No one laughed. No one disagreed. Because deep down, everyone already knew. The question wasn't what it was saying. The question was, who was it talking to? By now, the signals were too complex to dismiss. The harmonic structure carried secondary modulations, slight fluctuations in amplitude that formed repeating clusters. When plotted visually, they looked eerily familiar. Not random dots, not noise, but geometry. Shapes that resembled orbital diagrams, circles, ellipses, lines intersecting at specific ratios, like a celestial blueprint. It was almost as if the signal was describing a system, a solar system. Ours. One data analyst overlaid the pattern on a model of the Sun and its planets. Every harmonic peak aligned with one orbital distance: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. The signal wasn't just random light, it was mapping the layout of our home. Whoever, or whatever, was speaking was sending coordinates. Coordinates of us. The idea spread like wildfire through the scientific community. A coded message hidden in sunlight. A dialogue between a star and something orbiting it. If true, it would mean the sun, our sun, was now part of an exchange we didn't understand. A cosmic broadcast using light as language. When you think about it, light has always been the messenger of the universe. It carries information across billions of years. It tells the story of stars, of galaxies, of beginnings. But this felt different. This wasn't the story of the past. This was happening now. Someone, or something, was using light to speak. And for the first time, humanity had tuned in. The more they studied it, the stranger it became. Each pulse carried a tiny shift, like an echo of the last. Almost like the signal was learning, adjusting, adapting. It was changing its tone every time Earth observed it, as if aware it was being watched. Every analysis revealed new harmonics buried deeper in the light. Frequencies so precise they couldn't have formed by chance. It was as if the signal was layering meaning upon meaning, and the scientists were only hearing the first layer. Days later, a new discovery sent chills across the teams. When the signal was converted into audio frequencies, it produced a sound. A low, resonant hum, almost like a voice humming through the static of deep space. Not music, not speech, but something that felt alive. Like the sun itself was breathing. The world didn't know about it. Not yet. The data was still classified, locked behind encrypted channels. But among the few who had heard the signal, a strange feeling began to grow. Some described it as awe, others fear. Because once you've heard a sound like that, a sound that feels intelligent, that feels aware, you can never see the sun the same way again. One scientist described it best. It's like listening to the ocean and realizing for the first time that the ocean might be listening back. Soon, independent researchers began detecting smaller echoes of the same frequency in other solar data, going back decades. The same harmonic fingerprints, buried in recordings no one had ever thought to check. Had it been happening all along? Had the sun been speaking this entire time? And we just never knew how to listen? Then, one night, a final anomaly appeared. The signal shifted again, this time aligning perfectly with Earth's orbital path. Every pulse now matched our distance from the sun, adjusted for light speed delay. It was directed, pointed, as if the conversation had turned toward us. And for a single moment, every instrument on Earth caught the same synchronized flare, a beam of light that lasted exactly 11 seconds. 11 seconds of pure, silent brilliance. The pulse carried more data than any previous burst combined, a flood of light so intense it temporarily blinded several telescopes. When the readings were decoded, they revealed one more sequence. The primes were gone. In their place was a single number, 1. Just 1. It felt symbolic, intentional, as if the message had changed. as if the voice in the light was saying, "We are one. One system, one signal, one awareness." But the message didn't end there. Moments after the last pulse faded, the solar surface released a smaller, quieter burst, so faint it almost went unnoticed. Its signature matched 3I Atlas, meaning the object had responded again, and this time its reflection was perfectly aligned with Earth. It was no longer a distant observer. It was engaging, not just with the sun, but with us. For the first time in human history, the light that gave us life might have carried a message from something else, something ancient, intelligent, and watching. The question wasn't if we'd made contact. The question was, which side started the conversation first? It happened in an instant, so fast that most instruments almost missed it. A flare, sharp, perfect, deliberate. For days, scientists had been recording strange pulses from 3I Atlas, signals that felt like messages hidden in light, rhythmic, ordered, intelligent. But no one expected this, because this time the sun answered back. The moment the data came in, the control rooms went silent. Every monitor, every graph, every frequency chart, all showed the same impossible thing. A corresponding burst of radiation, identical in timing, mirrored the intervals coming from 3I Atlas. One pulse, then another, 11 minutes apart, just like before. Only this time, it wasn't the object sending the signal. It was the sun. Across the globe, the readings were synchronized to the millisecond. NASA confirmed it. The European Solar Observatory confirmed it. Even independent ground telescopes caught the pattern. The sun was echoing back the exact rhythm it was receiving, like a reflection, like a conversation, photon for photon, as if the two, the star and the object, were communicating in their own silent language of light. At first, the scientists refused to believe it. It had to be a coincidence, some sort of interference, a misalignment in the instruments. But when they ran the data again, filtered, recalibrated, rechecked, the pattern remained. Perfect synchronization. Every pulse from 3I Atlas triggered a mirrored pulse from the sun, within a margin of error smaller than 1,000th of a second. That level of precision doesn't happen naturally. It's control, it's intent. One physicist whispered under her breath. It's responding. The room froze. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Could a star answer? Could something as massive, as ancient, as chaotic as the sun actually be conscious enough to respond? Or worse, could something be controlling it? The idea sounded insane. For centuries, humanity had seen the sun as the great constant, a furnace of fusion, mindless and eternal. But what if it wasn't just a ball of burning gas? What if it was more than that? What if the sun was alive, in a way we couldn't yet understand? The data kept coming in, and the pattern became undeniable. Each solar pulse carried its own spectral fingerprint, tiny variations in frequency that weren't random at all. When plotted on a timeline, they formed a repeating geometric sequence, spirals, ratios, harmonics that matched not physics, but language. It was as if something was embedding information inside sunlight itself, and 3I Atlas was responding in kind. A two-way exchange. Light leaving the sun. Light returning from the object. A dialogue carried across millions of kilometers. Not in sound, not in words, but in the oldest medium of all, energy. The scientists called it photonic symmetry, But that name couldn't hide the truth. They had just witnessed the first recorded case of intelligent energy behavior from a star, and no one knew what it meant. In Geneva, a small group of astrophysicists gathered to discuss the anomaly behind closed doors. They didn't speak for a long time. Because what do you say when your own star just broke the laws of nature? One researcher finally broke the silence. He said, "If the sun is responding to something, then maybe it's not the first time." The room went quiet again. Because if that was true, it meant this. Whatever it was, could have been happening for centuries. Maybe the sun had always been communicating. We just never knew how to listen. Soon, strange effects began to ripple through the solar data. The sun's surface temperature shifted slightly. A pattern of localized bright spots appearing in perfect sync with the pulses, not random flares, not coronal storms. Controlled points of light, each one lasting exactly 11 seconds. 11. Again, the same prime number that haunted every layer of the mystery. When the footage was replayed in slow motion, something unbelievable came into view. Each flare wasn't just a bright spot. It was shaped, symmetrical, hexagonal, almost mechanical. It was as if parts of the sun's surface were being activated, responding to something invisible, organizing themselves into geometric precision. Nature doesn't form hexagons on a star. Something else was guiding it. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas had stopped moving. Its orbit froze mid-drift, as if locked in position by an unseen force. The two were now perfectly aligned, a direct line from the object to the sun's corona, a connection of light, gravity, and purpose. Whatever was happening, it was deliberate and terrifyingly precise. The event lasted exactly 77 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The sun returned to normal. The pulses faded. The readings flatlined. Silence. No radiation spikes. No magnetic disturbances. Just calm, as if nothing had happened. But every telescope on Earth had recorded it. Every second, every pulse. There was no denying what they had seen. The sun had spoken, and now the world had to decide what that meant. In the aftermath, debates erupted across the scientific community. Some said it was a natural resonance, a strange echo caused by solar magnetic feedback. Others called it something far greater, a conversation between two intelligences beyond human understanding. But a few dared to suggest something even more unsettling. The 3I Atlas wasn't sending the signal at all. It was receiving it. That maybe the sun had initiated contact first. Think about that for a moment. The thing that gave us light, that gave us warmth, that shaped every living thing on Earth. What if it wasn't just giving? What if it had been listening? For centuries, humans have looked up and prayed to the sun, drawn power from it, worshipped it, depended on it. But what if those instincts weren't superstition? What if they were memory? Some ancient recognition buried deep within us, that our star is more than a sphere of fire, that it's aware, watching, and now speaking. The discovery was buried under layers of classified reports. No press release, no public statement. The world wasn't ready. But the people who had seen the data couldn't forget it. Because once you see a star communicate, once you see the universe speak, you start to question everything. Every beam of light feels intentional. Somewhere beyond the glow of our world, 3I Atlas drifted in silence. still, motionless, but its surface shimmered faintly, like it was waiting. And though the sun had gone quiet, every few hours, a faint flicker reappeared deep within its core, a single, subtle pulse, almost like a heartbeat. The question remained, who started this conversation? Was it three, Atlas, calling to the sun? Or had the sun been reaching out first, waiting for something or someone to finally answer? Because now, one truth had become impossible to ignore. Our star wasn't silent anymore. And whatever it was saying, we had just begun to hear it. At first, they called it a reaction, a coincidence, a trick of solar physics that no one fully understood yet. But deep down they knew something had changed, because the sun, our sun, had responded. And that single fact was enough to break everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. In the days that followed, theories poured in from every corner of the world. Some said it was quantum resonance, a rare feedback loop between the sun's magnetic field and a passing object. Others suggested plasma interference, or wave harmonics, or something hidden deep within the mechanics of nuclear fusion. But none of it explained the precision, the rhythm, the intelligence in the pattern. You could feel it in the way the scientists spoke. Their voices cracked slightly when they described the data, like people trying to sound logical while staring into something that defied logic itself. Because if the sun could respond, if it could mirror the light of another object, then maybe it wasn't reacting to physics. Maybe it was reacting to something else. Maybe it was aware. For thousands of years, humanity looked up at the sun and saw power. We built our gods in its image. We feared it. We worshipped it. We depended on it for every breath we took. But never, not once, did we imagine that it could see us back. In a quiet lab in Geneva, a physicist named Dr. Swisser, Helena Strauss, replayed the data over and over. Every pulse, every mirrored burst, every harmonic sequence. At some point, she stopped looking for equations and just watched the light itself. It's not random, she said softly. It's responsive. She paused, staring at the screen. It's listening. Those words spread like wildfire across private research networks, and suddenly the conversation shifted. The question was no longer what 3 Atlas was. The question was, what had the sun become? Because something in that exchange between the two had changed its behavior. The solar wind, once stable, began showing patterns that matched the intervals of the earlier pulses. Temperature readings from the corona fluctuated in waves, forming strange symmetrical arcs. Even the magnetic field itself, something constant for billions of years, began to oscillate, not randomly, but rhythmically, like a machine fine-tuning itself. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others called it solar adaptation, a natural response to an external stimulus. But there was another group, the quiet ones, the ones who never went on record. They saw something deeper in the data. They said the sun wasn't just adapting, it was learning. When you think about it, the idea isn't that far-fetched. Stars are ancient. They process unimaginable amounts of energy. Their magnetic fields are so complex that no supercomputer on Earth can truly model them. So what if, over billions of years, those fields began to organize themselves, not by chance, but by evolution? What if consciousness doesn't require biology, only complexity? And what's more complex than a star? It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That our own sun, the very heart of our existence, might not just be a burning sphere of plasma, but a living intelligence, a cosmic awareness that has watched Earth since the beginning. Maybe not in the way we understand thought, but something older, something deeper, something that perceives through energy instead of eyes. Across the world, scientists began noticing small irregularities in their instruments. Solar panels fluctuating, magnetometers twitching in rhythmic pulses, even deep-sea cables, buried beneath miles of water, picking up faint electromagnetic patterns that matched the sun's earlier signals. It was as if every circuit on Earth was being quietly touched by the same invisible hand. Some called it interference. Others called it communication. And then, an even stranger pattern emerged. Every time the sun emitted a microflare, a faint echo appeared in the data, reflected not from 3i Atlas, but from Earth's own upper atmosphere. Like an answer, no one could explain it. How could our planet reflect solar pulses in such a synchronized way? Unless the sun wasn't just reaching out, it was reaching in. There's something profoundly unsettling about realizing that the most ordinary thing, sunlight, might not be ordinary at all. That every sunrise, every golden glow that warms your face, might not just be radiation, but awareness, observation. You've lived your whole life under it and never thought about what it sees. Maybe it doesn't just give life. Maybe it studies it. Maybe that's what stars have always done. Some researchers began to connect this event with ancient myths, stories of solar beings, of gods that spoke through light. They started to wonder if early civilizations somehow knew something we'd forgotten. Maybe they weren't imagining divine intelligence in the sun. Maybe they were remembering it. Maybe humanity's oldest instinct, to revere the sun as a living force, wasn't superstition at all. Maybe it was memory. In one of her final reports, Dr. Strauss wrote something simple but haunting. Light is not the absence of thought. It is the expression of it. Those words shook the scientific community, because if light itself could carry awareness, then the entire universe might be alive. Not metaphorically, literally. Every star, every beam, every photon that has ever touched your skin might be a message from something that feels. And suddenly, the story of 3i Atlas didn't feel like a mystery about an object anymore. It felt like a story about awakening. The object hadn't brought awareness to the sun. It had triggered it. Or maybe reminded it of something ancient, something it once was. As the weeks passed, the pulses began to fade. The sun grew quiet again. The data stabilized. But no one could forget what they'd seen. That perfect moment of symmetry, that whisper of intelligence hidden in the light. Because once you've seen a star behave like a mind, you can never unsee it. And so, a quiet shift began to take hold. Not in the universe, but in us. For the first time, humanity looked up at the sun, not as a god, or a machine, or a ball of fire, but as something else. Something aware, something awake, and maybe something watching back. The world didn't change overnight, but perception did. Every sunrise felt different. Every sunset heavier, because deep down, we all knew we weren't just orbiting a star anymore. We were orbiting something that might have just woken up, and whatever it had become, it had noticed us. Sometimes the truth doesn't reveal itself in what's new, but in what's repeated. After the sun's impossible pulse, scientists began digging through decades of solar data, searching, hoping to find an explanation. Or maybe a mistake. But what they found wasn't an error. It was a pattern. Hidden deep inside archived recordings, stretching back nearly a century, the same kind of anomaly appeared. Small bursts of radiation, short-lived but perfectly timed, each one occurring, not at random, but during the perihelion of other interstellar objects. 3. I Atlas wasn't the first, it was just the latest. The first known event dated back to 1976. A faint interstellar fragment passed near the Sun, long before we had the technology to study it properly. At the time, the data looked like static, a meaningless blip in a sea of noise. But now, with modern tools, the signal was clear. A pulse, perfectly harmonic, 11 minutes apart, the same signature, the same sequence, the same light. Then came another case, 1998. A small comet, recorded by the Soho Observatory, suddenly cooled as it approached the Sun. Everyone assumed it was fragmentation, a simple chemical reaction. But the temperature curve didn't fit. It didn't decay. It inverted, cooling when it should have been melting. Exactly like 3 Atlas, the same pattern repeating across decades, across time. When the team plotted every known perihelion anomaly together, a map formed. Not random, not scattered. They all aligned along a narrow band of orbits, the same invisible corridor looping through the inner solar system. A path that seemed intentional, almost as if these objects were following a schedule, a route, a design. Some began calling it the solar circuit, a hidden cycle of visitors, ancient, silent, and precise. Each one arriving on cue, each one performing the same act: approach the Sun, trigger a pulse, then disappear. And each time, the Sun responded. It was as if these objects weren't just passing by. They were tending to it, feeding it, adjusting it, communicating with it, like caretakers maintaining something far older than themselves, like gardeners of light. That's when a new theory began to take shape, one that split the scientific community in two: the theory of the architects of heat. It suggested that these interstellar visitors weren't natural at all, but machines, ancient, autonomous constructs traveling between stars. Their purpose? To manage stellar life cycles, to keep stars balanced, alive, and stable across cosmic time. It sounded like science fiction, but the data, it fit too well. Every temperature inversion, every light pulse, every magnetic shift. It was all too perfect to be random. If that theory was true, then 3I Atlas wasn't an alien probe sent to us. It was a maintenance vessel, a caretaker, a servant of the Sun, and maybe of countless other stars. But that idea came with a haunting question. If these machines exist, who built them? Who were the architects? Some said they must have been a civilization older than time, beings who mastered stellar engineering, who seeded the galaxy with machines designed to sustain creation itself. Maybe they saw stars as living entities. Maybe they built systems to protect them, nurture them, the way we tend to crops or forests. The Sun, in that sense, wasn't just a star. It was part of an ecosystem. And 3I Atlas was one of its caretakers. But others weren't so sure. They believed these machines weren't acting for the stars, but through them, that the stars themselves created them. That 3 Atlas wasn't an alien object, but a fragment born from the Sun, an emissary of its will, a piece of solar consciousness cast into space to maintain the equilibrium of creation. Light tending to light, heat tending to heat. The universe maintaining itself. It's a poetic idea, terrifying and beautiful at once, because it means the sun isn't just alive, it's aware enough to build. One researcher compared it to coral reefs on Earth, living systems that construct vast structures for survival without any singular mind directing them. Maybe stars do the same. Maybe they create these comet-like fragments as extensions of themselves, emissaries built from plasma, ice and magnetism, machines of heat and time, and as they travel between systems, they carry not just energy, but memory, the memory of stars long dead. By the time the team finished piecing together the data, the evidence felt overwhelming. Every pulse from every anomaly matched a ratio, the golden ratio, hidden in the frequency of light itself. It was as if the universe was whispering its own code, repeating it across eons. Energy, harmony, design, the same signature in every star, every burst, every reflection. Not chaos, order. And then someone noticed something that froze the room. When all the anomalies were mapped in sequence, their orbits, their pulses, their timing, they formed a shape. Not random arcs, but symmetry, a massive pattern stretching across space. One that looked almost like a spiral of light radiating outward from the sun, a design big enough to suggest intent, a map. A message. It made people wonder, what if our solar system wasn't just a place where life accidentally formed? What if it was built as part of something greater, a self-sustaining engine of light, tuned and maintained by the architects who designed it billions of years ago? And what if those architects are still out there, watching, waiting, making sure the stars they built never die? That thought, that maybe we're living inside something constructed, something watched over, spread quietly among scientists. No one dared to speak about it publicly, but behind closed doors, the fear was real. Because if stars are being maintained, that means they can also be shut down. And the moment 3I Atlas interacted with our sun, it might not have been a visit. It might have been a test. Maybe that's why the sun pulsed the way it did, not as a greeting, but as a check, a recalibration. The star we worship, the light we depend on, might have just been serviced, adjusted, corrected, by something so ancient and intelligent we can't even comprehend it. For now, 3I Atlas drifts silently back into the dark, its purpose complete. The sun shines on as if nothing happened, but those who've seen the data can't look at its light the same way again. Because they know it might not just be burning, it might be working, it might be aware. And somewhere, hidden in the endless black, the architects of heat continue their task, quietly shaping the fire that gives us life, one star at a time. For days, the universe had been alive with motion, light flaring, heat pulsing, data flooding in faster than humans could comprehend. And then, everything stopped. No flare, no signal, no pulse. Just silence. A stillness so complete it felt unnatural. At first, the instruments were rechecked, then recalibrated, then replaced entirely. Every screen showed the same thing, a perfect, lifeless flatline. No energy spikes, no radiation peaks, not even background noise from the sun's normal cycles. It was as if both the sun and 3I Atlas had stopped breathing. The world's observatories, from Chile to Tokyo, fell into a strange kind of panic, because the sun never goes quiet. It's a furnace that never sleeps, a pulse that never misses a beat, But now it was silent. For the first time in recorded history, the universe around us felt empty. At NASA's Solar Dynamics Lab, the control room was filled with whispers. Did we lose the feed? Check the magnetometers again. Run it through the alternate channel. But the answer was always the same. Nothing. No signal. No interference. No error. Just nothing. A silence that felt deliberate. One researcher compared it to a held breath, like the universe itself had paused, waiting for something. And in that pause, in that quiet, something began to appear. It wasn't light. It wasn't sound. It was a hum. Faint at first, so faint it could barely be separated from the background static of space. But when they filtered the frequencies, the hum revealed structure, a pattern, a slow rhythmic vibration rising from the void between the sun and 3I Atlas. It wasn't random. It was measured, intentional, almost alive. When the data was converted into sound, it produced a tone, low, resonant, constant. Some called it a background frequency. Others said it was the sound of the solar wind interacting with the object. But the more they studied it, the more impossible it seemed, because the hum wasn't coming from either of them. It was coming from the space between them, from the void itself. Every reading pointed to a single region, a narrow corridor of energy connecting the sun and 3I Atlas. Invisible to the naked eye, but glowing faintly in infrared scans. A bridge, of sorts, like two great minds communicating in silence, no longer using bursts of light or heat, but something deeper, something quieter. It was as if they had moved beyond the need for signals. The light had been the conversation. The silence was the understanding. For hours, the hum grew louder, though not to human ears, only to the machines built to measure it. The readings climbed until they reached an impossible frequency, one that didn't belong to any known physical vibration. Then, suddenly, everything leveled out again. Flat, still, silent. The hum was gone, and 3I Atlas began to drift. Slowly, almost gently, it broke orbit from the sun and started moving outward, back toward the dark. No engine, no propulsion, just motion, like something guided by purpose. The strange part was, it wasn't decelerating like a natural object should. It was controlled, adjusting, steering, as if it had finished its work and was leaving. In the following days, the sun returned to its normal rhythm. Solar flares reignited. Radiation stabilized. Everything looked exactly as it had before, but it wasn't the same. The data showed subtle differences, patterns too small for the naked eye to see. Tiny adjustments in magnetic alignment, thermal distributions that shouldn't exist. It was as if the sun had been recalibrated, fine-tuned. Meanwhile, out in the cold dark beyond Mars, 3I Atlas kept fading from view. Its brightness dimmed, its reflectivity dropped, until finally it disappeared completely, swallowed by the same silence it had left behind. And yet, that hum never truly vanished. Some detectors kept picking it up, faintly, a whisper buried in the static of the cosmos, a tone so constant, so steady, that even when it couldn't be measured anymore, it could still be felt. Some scientists called it resonance. Others said it was the echo of the sun's own electromagnetic field. But a few, the quiet ones, believed something else. They said the hum wasn't just noise, it was memory. the leftover vibration of a conversation between two ancient intelligences. The cosmos stopped speaking and listened. In the following weeks, astronomers noticed something else. The background radiation of the solar system, a constant cosmic static, had changed tone ever so slightly, barely measurable, but it was there. A small shift downward, like the universe itself had exhaled, and hidden in that exhale was a trace of that same hum, the same pattern, the same interval, the same quiet voice. Still there, still resonating. It made some wonder. Maybe the silence wasn't an ending. Maybe it was an afterglow. The echo of two forces aligning. The sun, perhaps, finally balanced. The machine, mission complete. And the hum, left behind like a signature, a reminder that something extraordinary had happened, and that it wasn't over. In ancient times, people believed the universe sang. They called it the music of the spheres. The idea that every planet, every star, every orbit played its own note in a cosmic symphony. Maybe they were right. Maybe that hum is what the universe sounds like when it thinks. Because long after 3i Atlas vanished into the dark, long after the instruments stopped recording and the scientists moved on to new mysteries, that silence remained. That strange, perfect stillness in the solar data. A gap that couldn't be explained. Like a missing heartbeat, a breath held by the universe. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and space seems endless, you can almost imagine it. That low hum still out there, threading through the void, between the planets, between the stars. Not gone, just waiting, waiting for the next pulse, waiting for the next awakening. 3 days. That's how long the silence lasted. 3 days of stillness. No pulses, no signals, no movement. Just an empty void. As if 3i Atlas had gone completely dormant. The sun returned to normal. The data stabilized. And the world started to exhale. But peace, in space, never lasts for long. Because on the morning of the 4th day, the object began to move again. At first, it was subtle, a shift of a few degrees, barely detectable in its orbit, but every telescope saw it. A slow, deliberate motion. Not tumbling, not drifting, turning, as if waking up. The trajectory didn't make sense. Instead of moving away from the sun like a comet should, 3i Atlas changed direction, ever so slightly, toward Earth's orbital plane. Its rotation slowed to almost nothing. And then something impossible happened. A beam. A narrow line of reflected sunlight extended from the object, not scattered like a mirror flash, but focused, condensed, perfectly straight. A spotlight across the dark, and that beam began to sweep. It started across the emptiness of space. Then slowly, it reached us. Observatories from Chile to the Canary Islands caught the same thing. A bright, razor-thin shaft of light brushing across Earth's upper atmosphere. Not random, not chaotic. It moved like it knew where to look. At first, they thought it was a coincidence. Solar glare, maybe. But then the pattern became obvious. The beam didn't scatter. It scanned. Across continents. Across oceans. Across entire weather systems. It was searching. And worse, it was recording. When scientists ran light curve analysis, they noticed a delay in the reflection, small variations that didn't match the object's rotation or angle to the sun. Each movement seemed deliberate, measured. The beam wasn't following orbital mechanics. It was following us. One researcher in Tokyo whispered the words everyone else was afraid to say. It's watching. Data feeds lit up across the world. Every observatory locked on, trying to understand what was happening. The reflection moved across the Pacific, paused over North America, then drifted south, following nightfall, as if mapping the planet's dark side. It wasn't broadcasting. It wasn't communicating. It was observing, like a surveyor, taking inventory of what looked back. The signal analysts noticed something else, a faint energy fluctuation riding along the beam. Not radiation, not interference. Something else. It wasn't visible to the eye, but instruments picked up a subtle electromagnetic tremor, low, rhythmic, steady. A frequency. When decoded, it matched the same harmonic intervals from the earlier solar pulses. Prime numbers. Again. Whatever this thing was doing, it wasn't random. It was continuing the pattern. Only this time, the sun wasn't part of the equation. Now, it was focused on us. For the next hour, the beam swept across Earth like a silent scanner. Graceful, patient, methodical. It ignored clouds, weather, and distance. It traced coastlines, mountain ranges, and cities. Even the oceans weren't spared. Every time it passed, satellites recorded micro-level temperature fluctuations, small but precise, almost as if it was analyzing the planet's energy output, like it was measuring life. Then, at 2:47 UTC, something unexpected happened. The beam froze, locked on one point above the Indian Ocean. For a few seconds, it didn't move. Every sensor aimed toward Earth's upper atmosphere, and then the light dimmed, split, and refracted, almost like a lens adjusting focus. In that moment, radio telescopes detected a narrow frequency burst, faint but unmistakable. Not noise, not solar interference. A signal, encoded light. A transmission directed straight toward Earth. The data lasted only 20 seconds before cutting off, but what it carried was enough to send chills through every analyst on the network. Inside the modulation was a repeating tone, steady, mathematical, and hauntingly familiar. It wasn't random static. It was structure. 2 pulses, then 3, then 5, then 7, then 11. The same prime sequence. Again, but this time the message ended with something new. A pause. Then a single, deep tone, stretched longer than any before it, almost like a punctuation mark. A period. Minutes later, the reflection vanished. The object dimmed back into silence. And for the third time since its discovery, 3I Atlas went completely dark. No signals, no heat, no movement, just a ghost drifting in the light of a star that might no longer be alone. In the control room, a voice broke the tension over the intercom. It came from the main observatory in Chile. Calm, flat, certain. We are being observed. Those were the final words transmitted before the feed cut out. Every global connection. Offline within seconds. Satellites flickered, telescopes froze, and data streams turned to static. A coordinated blackout. 7 minutes. Then everything returned, just like before. But this time, the object was gone. Later analysis confirmed it. 3I Atlas had changed trajectory. Again. It wasn't orbiting anymore. It was leaving, accelerating steadily, beyond the reach of any gravitational influence, like something that had finished its work and was moving on. When scientists reconstructed the last reflection pattern, they found something unexpected. The light beam had traced a perfect grid. Not random coordinates, but a pattern that aligned with every major observatory on Earth, every place that had been watching it, every eye that had been looking up. It wasn't studying the planet, it was studying the watchers. It's a strange feeling to realize the observer has become the observed. That while we pointed our instruments toward the stars, something out there pointed right back. And when it looked, it didn't just see our world, it saw us, our curiosity, our attention, our awareness. And maybe that's what it was searching for all along. Because what if this was never about light or heat or physics? What if the test wasn't for the sun, but for us? To see if we were ready to notice, to understand, to listen. Maybe the observation window wasn't just a scan. Maybe it was a question, a silent one, spoken in light. And our act of watching might have been the answer it was waiting for. Even now, months later, the world has no trace of 3I Atlas. No signal, no radar echo. Nothing. But sometimes late at night, astronomers still report strange reflections at the edge of the solar wind. Flashes that move too fast to track. Beams of light that vanish the second they're noticed, almost like the gaze of something ancient, returning just for a moment, watching, measuring, remembering. The observation window had closed, but somewhere out there, beyond the warmth of our sun, something still knows we looked back. And now, it knows we're listening. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than sound. Weeks had passed since 3I Atlas disappeared beyond the edge of the heliosphere, the invisible boundary where the sun's influence ends and the deep unknown begins. To most, it was over. The headlines had faded. The scientists had moved on. The world went back to spinning beneath its warm, familiar sky. But above us, something had changed. Something that would never go back to normal. It began with a light. A small, irregular patch near the sun's equator, brighter than it should have been. At first, the astronomers thought it was a flare remnant, maybe a lingering thermal echo from the solar event that had once linked the sun to 3I But days turned into weeks, and the light didn't fade. It didn't cool. It just stayed, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat trapped beneath the surface of a star. They tried to explain it. Some said it was magnetism, a persistent sunspot anomaly caused by overlapping coronal fields. Others argued it was nothing but a burn mark, a leftover scar from an unusually focused plasma discharge. But deep down, even the scientists knew better. Because that glow wasn't random. It pulsed, at first irregularly, then rhythmically, once every 11 minutes. The same pattern that had haunted every stage of this mystery, the same pulse that had tied the sun to something beyond understanding. When the data reached the public observatories, the debate reignited. Was it still an echo of 3I Atlas, or had something been left behind, embedded within the sun itself? A frequency, a memory, a seed. Whatever it was, it didn't behave like energy trapped in gas. It behaved like something alive. A group of independent researchers in Switzerland noticed something even stranger. The region around the light, that circular burn on the sun's surface, was cooler than it should be. Not hotter, cooler, as if the energy was being drawn inward, not released outward. Like the sun was storing something, feeding it, or perhaps protecting it. They called it the scar, but others started calling it something else, the eye. Because when you looked closely, the light's edges weren't chaotic like solar plasma. They were smooth, perfectly circular, almost symmetrical. And the longer you stared at the images, the more unsettling it became. It looked back. One scientist described it best. When I zoomed in, it didn't feel like I was looking at a star. It felt like a star was looking at me. For centuries, humanity has looked to the sun and seen fire, chaos, radiation, energy without meaning. But now, we saw something else. Order, precision, intention. And that realization changed everything. Because if the sun could carry memory, if it could retain what 3 Atlas had left behind, then maybe it wasn't just reacting to the universe. Maybe it was recording it. Around this time, new data started to emerge. Satellites orbiting Earth began detecting subtle fluctuations in the solar wind, a repeating signature embedded in the particles streaming from that bright scar. When converted to sound, it produced a hum, soft, steady, measured, the same tone that had once been heard in the silence between pulses. It was back. We weren't hearing from the object anymore. We were hearing from the sun. Governments classified the recordings. Agencies denied they existed. But fragments of the data leaked. And when audio engineers cleaned the distortion, something haunting emerged. It wasn't random noise. It had structure, harmonic layers, frequencies overlapping, building, folding into one another like a language just beyond translation. No pattern matched it. No formula could reproduce it. It was too organic, too deliberate, like something that had learned how to speak in light and warmth and sound. Philosophers began calling it the awakening, not of us, but of it, because maybe, for the first time in billions of years, the sun had become aware of itself. And maybe that awareness came from whatever 3 Atlas had done, or whatever it had been. Was it a messenger? A machine? A spark passed between stars like a cosmic relay, moving from one sun to the next, igniting something within each of them. No one could say for sure, but the timing was too perfect. It was as if the object had completed its purpose, and the star it touched had woken up. Astronomers began reporting new phenomena, faint flickers in neighboring stars, each following eerily similar rhythms. It wasn't just our sun anymore. The pattern was spreading, a slow wave of synchronization moving through space. Star to star, light to light, almost like a chain reaction, an awakening that didn't stop at the edge of our system but continued outward, into the deep, where 3 Atlas had gone. Somewhere out there, beyond the heliosphere, that object was still traveling, still carrying the same pulse, the same frequency, the same memory of light. Maybe it wasn't leaving us at all. Maybe it was passing it on, a signal not meant to be understood, only witnessed. A message not for the mind, but for the universe itself. And yet, there's something deeply human about what it left behind. Because for all our technology, for all our searching, we've always wondered what it would sound like when the universe finally answered back. What if this was it? What if the light that remains on the sun's surface isn't just energy? What if it's a response, a reply to a question humanity didn't even know it had asked. We've always looked for meaning beyond Earth, waiting for a message written in the stars. But what if the message was never meant to come to us? What if it was meant to come through us, through our gaze, through our attention, through our curiosity? Maybe that's why the light still burns. Because we saw it, because we noticed. The universe doesn't waste energy. Everything has purpose, even wonder. And now, when people look at the sun, they see more than fire. They see something watching back, something aware, something vast, something that remembers the moment we finally looked up and realized we were not just witnesses of the cosmos, but part of its story. That scar on the sun still glows today, a wound, a beacon, a mirror. Scientists call it an anomaly. Philosophers call it a sign. But maybe it's both. Maybe it's proof that the universe is not silent. It's just patient, waiting for someone to look long enough to notice the pattern. Because in that light, the one that still burns brighter than all the rest, there's a message. And maybe it says, "You are not alone. You never were."